The broken body of the young prince was brought into the sanctuary of healing. Hygeia at once, knowing the request made by the goddess who had brought the body, rushed to come and wash the blood and anoint the body of the young prince, once handsome and charming and full of life and energy, now shattered beneath the trampling hooves of his own horses. Artemis herself, the maiden huntress, her arrows quivered, her bow unstrung and over her shoulders, stood gnawing at her knuckles, worrying and fretting that it was too late. For Hippolytus had been trampled to death 22 hours earlier, and the potion which the famed doctor himself would be able to use, which Asclepios would be able to apply to that broken body to bring it back to life, could only be applied in the window of 24 hours. Anybody dead for longer than that must stay in the Stygian grip of Hades himself in the underworld. And so the body had to be readied, it had to be prepared, the ointments had to be applied, the prayers and the recitations had to be made over it, as young Hippolytus's fractured corpse was laid out, properly aligned, and Hygeia, her job done, called to her father, and she stepped back. Asclepios, old and grey, came forward, leaning heavily upon his staff, around which a master craftsman had carved the almost living figure of a serpent from the wood. And he took the flask of the Gorgon's blood, the very ichor of Medusa herself that had dripped from the right-hand side of her corpse and been gathered as her head was still rolling across the floor, gathered and presented to him by Athena herself, she who was all-wise and all-knowing. He took that bottle, now 3/4 gone, only a quarter of the ichor left within that bottle, enough to raise perhaps 20 or 30 more corpses before the final fluid was gone from the bottle. And he unstoppered it and took out the drips, opened the mouth of the body, and let one single hideous green Icarus drop fall into the mouth, onto the tongue of the dead youth. And then they all stood back and they watched and they waited as Asclepios murmured the prayers and the spells necessary to cause the ichor to do its job, and it ran throughout the body of Hippolytus, almost as if someone had plugged him into electricity. The body began to jidder, began to judder, began to shake, began to spasm, until at last coughing and spluttering lung air re-entered the lungs, and Hippolytus was restored to life. They could hear the bones mending. They could hear the muscles realigning. They could hear the body restoring itself to a working order under the power, the magic, the essence of the Gorgon's blood. And at last, Hippolytus was able to stand up back upon his own feet, restored, made whole, given life, given more than life. For all of those who tasted of the bloods of the Gorgon did not simply come back to a normal mortal lifespan, they came back to a lifespan far beyond anything any mortal had any right to expect. And the look of relief, of joy upon the face of Artemis was beyond description. It was reward enough for Asclepios, was reward enough for Hygeia and his other daughters and his sons, who all had their role to play in the great healing shrine. While Hippolytus pledged a small fortune to build more such shrines across Greece, Artemis promised great reward, but Asclepios said, "Your joy is enough." But of course, goddesses will not be denied when they wish to shower affection upon the living. But not all members of Olympus were content. For there was one, no longer resident of Olympus, but once of Olympus, now down deep, deep, deep within the earth itself, down into the festering bowels of the underworld, Hades himself, lord of his own eponymous domain, fumed and roared and shook to have their young Prince Hippolytus snatched from his grasp, where all of the dead should by all rights of the divine order reside for evermore, yet one more taken from him by this upstart Asclepios, this doctor, this healer, this physician, who sought not just to mend bones and repair bodies and remove tumours and restore sight, but who sought to restore life to the dead. One step too far as Hades was concerned. And the roaring and the shaking of the voice from the depths of the underworld reached up as far as Olympus itself, and Zeus heard this complaint as he had heard all of the other complaints when Asclepios had journeyed far and wide, bringing the dead back here and there and left and right and north and south and east and west. And Zeus had promised the last time this had happened would be the last time this would be allowed to happen. And as Hades pointed out, Zeus had not ensured that the last time was the last time, for once again, the dead were removed from the land of the dead. And as aged Asclepios, leaning heavily upon his staff, strolled out into the morning sun to enjoy the warmth of a Greek dawn, Zeus, high up in Olympus, did what his brother had bade him to do so many times before. He let loose with a thunderbolt that zoomed down from the heavens, struck Asclepios, the great healer, the great physician, dead upon the earth. The wrath of the overlord who could not bear to see yet one more person brought back when they should be gone. Hygeia wept and screamed. All of his other daughters and sons wept and screamed. They fished out the bottle with the ichor of Medusa, still some within the base, and they said the prayers over the body. They said all that they knew needed to be said. They rubbed in the ointments and the oils as they knew they had done so many times before, and at length they dropped one drop of the ichor upon Asclepius' tongue, and nothing happened. So they dropped another, and another, and another, until the bottle itself was emptied in the bid to bring dear old Asclepius back. And they had to admit that either Asclepius knew some charm, some spells, some enchantments to use with the ointment which he had never passed on to his sons and daughters, or Zeus himself was barring the ointment from working, until all of the blood of Medusa, the ichor of the Gorgon, was gone, and no more mortals would be restored to life after death had delivered them unto Hades. Apollo howled and wept at the death of his son Asclepius, the great healer, who had followed in the divine arts of Apollo, extended the divine arts of Apollo when it came to matters of healing, of the curing of disease, of the ending of plagues. He wept and he wept with such force that Zeus at length stayed him and said, "There are more forms of life than one. There are more things that can be done than simply to hurl Asclepius down into the underworld. He shall not dwell with death. Having defied death so often, I decree, let him live forever in the stars. And Zeus reached down and plucked up the soul of Asclepios, and instead of letting it fall into Hades, he lifted it into the heavens itself, and there Asclepios became a constellation, became a great pattern of stars in the heavens, that the eternal physician should watch over not only his sons and his daughters and his grandsons and his granddaughters, but all those who should practice the healing arts. Every doctor, every nurse, every dentist and psychiatrist, every optician, every practitioner of the skills of healing and medicine, from that day to this falls under the divine aegis of Asclepios. And still there are those who seek to cure plagues, to repair bodies, to restore minds, to transform and uplift. But there are also those who seek to go beyond the bounds that Zeus has set, to combat death itself, to break the chains of Hades, to transform the human body into ways that it was never meant to be transformed. And perhaps Zeus will have his say yet, but Asclepios sees the wisdom in all things and the compassion in all healers. And if sometimes he also sees ambition, well, he can understand that.